In this video, we're going to learn about the invertebrates that belong to the basal phyla. Invertebrates are organisms that belong to the domain of Eukarya and the kingdom of Animalia. All invertebrates are multicellular eukaryotic heterotrophs that have tissues but lack a vertebral column or a backbone. The group of invertebrates forms a paraphyletic group because it does not include animals known as vertebrates, even though vertebrates evolved from the same ancestor that the invertebrates evolved from. And hence there is no clade called as Invertebrata since it is a paraphyletic group. Scientists have determined that invertebrates evolved from protists. In fact, choanoflagellates are considered to be the closest relatives to animals, including invertebrates. It is thought that choanoflagellates, which are unicellular protists, aggregated together to eventually form the first invertebrate. In fact, sponges, which are considered to be as one of the earliest animals that evolved, show the presence of these specialized cells called choanocytes that are very similar to choanoflagellates. Invertebrates are grouped into different phyla based on their anatomical features as well as embryonic developmental patterns. There have been more than 35 phyla that have been identified, but most of the invertebrates can be grouped in around 10 phyla. Some of the most important phyla, which has many invertebrates, is listed, and it should be noted that the phylum of Chordata includes not only invertebrates but also vertebrate animals. The basal phyla are a group of organisms that are considered to have evolved the earliest. They show a simple body plan that tends to be either radially symmetrical or asymmetrical in nature. All members of the basal phyla are diploblasts in that they give rise to only 2 germ layers during development. The organisms that belong to the phyla of Porifera, which includes sponges, the phylum of Cnidaria, that includes jellyfish, the phylum of Ctenophora, which includes comb jellies, and the invertebrates in the phylum of Plecozoa all belong to the basal phyla. Let us first look at Porifera. All organisms that belong to the basal phyla are marine organisms and live in water. The phylum of Porifera belongs to the clade Parazoa, and it includes the invertebrate animals called sponges. Sponges are sessile or non-motile animals that are asymmetric. They're considered as filter feeders because they filter out food particles from water. The body of sponges has 2 layers of cells. There is an outer epidermis and an inner layer of cells that have choanocytes. These 2 layers of cells are separated by the gelatinous mesohyl. Many scientists agree that sponges do not have true distinct tissues the way other animals do. The rudimentary tissues that they do have also don't form through the germ layers the way it is observed in other animals. Sponges do have specialized cells like choanocytes that play important roles in phagocytosis of food particles to obtain nourishment for the sponge. They also have amoebocytes, which are these cells that move around the body of the sponge and provide nourishment as well as perform other functions in the sponge. And hence, sponges do have specialized cells and rudimentary tissues that allow it to survive. Members of the phylum Porifera show both sexual and asexual modes of reproduction. The asexual mode of reproduction is through a process called as budding, where a bulge is formed in the parent sponge, which is considered as a bud, and as it grows, it ultimately detaches from the parent and attaches to a substrate to form a new sponge. Most sponges are considered as hermaphrodites in that they're able to make both male and female gametes. Sponges also show sequential hermaphroditism, which is quite a unique property where they're able to exhibit one sex at a certain period of time and then switch to another sex. And thus, they're able to first make sperm at one stage and then switch to make eggs in another stage. During the process of sexual reproduction, the sperm that is generated by a sponge are able to swim to another sponge where the eggs are present. These sperm that are present in the water enter the sponge through these holes or pores, and once they enter into the female sponge where the egg cell is present, fusion occurs to form a zygote. The zygote that is thus formed undergoes development to form a larva. The larva is able to enter into the body of the sponge, and because it has flagella, it is able to swim. It swims out of the sponge, and the larva then settles onto a substrate to become a sessile or non-motile adult sponge. Let's now look at the phylum of Cnidaria, which belongs to the clade of Eumetazoa. Eumetazoans are organisms that are considered to have true tissues. Cnidarians are radially symmetrical, diploblastic invertebrates. They include different types of organisms like hydra, jellyfish, sea anemones, and corals. Cnidarians have a simple body plan which consists of a sac that has a central digestive compartment called as a gastrovascular cavity and tentacles that are present near the mouth of the organism. The gastrovascular cavity was a key innovation event during evolution because it allowed the organism to digest food in an extracellular fashion. This is different from the sponges where they had cells that would phagocytose the food and digest it inside the cell. Here, food can be digested within the gastrovascular cavity instead of being phagocytosed by cells. There are two main types of bodies observed in cnidarians. The polyp is a cylindrical pipe-shaped form that is non-motile and hence is sessile. Another type of body that is observed in cnidarians is the medusa. This is a free-floating umbrella-shaped body that has a gelatinous form. Cnidarians are carnivores that are able to capture their prey with their tentacles that are close to the mouth. In the tentacles, there are these specialized cells called as cnidocytes that aid in the capture of prey and also help in defense. These cnidocytes have organelles called as cnidae that are able to explode outwards. In fact, it is the presence of these cnidocytes and cnidae that give the phylum its name of Cnidaria. Some cnidocytes have these special cnidae called as nematocysts, which have a stinging thread. This stinging thread gets expelled out upon appropriate stimuli and is able to penetrate into the prey or a predator, whichever is nearby. If it is a prey, then the tentacles are able to engulf the prey into the gastrovascular cavity where it will eventually get digested. Cnidarians show the presence of a very primitive digestive system. In fact, there is only one opening that allows the food to enter and any waste that is generated from the food to exit out of the body. And thus, the mouth and the anus is the same opening. Cnidarians do not have a well-developed nervous system, but they do have nerve cells that form these net-like structures called as nerve nets. These nerve nets are present throughout the body and are able to coordinate movement in the medusae, which are the motile form of cnidarians. Medusae are able to move either by passive drifting or through contractions of their umbrella body. Jellyfish are examples of medusae. However, animals like sea anemones, hydra, and corals exist in the form of polyps, which are the non-motile version of cnidarians. Cnidarians exhibit sexual as well as asexual modes of reproduction. The asexual mode of reproduction is performed through budding, which is a process similar to what we saw in sponges. During the sexual mode of reproduction, the gametes fuse to form a zygote, and the zygote undergoes development to form a larva called as a planula. The larva then undergoes metamorphosis and is able to form the adult form, which when it attains sexual maturity is able to undergo sexual reproduction again. The phylum Ctenophora includes organisms that belong to the clade Eumetazoa and are radially symmetrical organisms that are diploblasts and that they make only 2 germ layers. The organisms belonging to the phylum Ctenophora also are included in the Basal phyla. Ctenophorans are similar to cnidarians, but structurally they have much more complex bodies. For example, they have a much more complex digestive system where now there are 2 openings present instead of only 1, which we saw in the cnidarians. Organisms called as comb jellies belong to the phylum of Ctenophora. They are called comb jellies because in their bodies they have sets of cilia that aid in movement. The way the cilia are arranged, they generate a structure that looks like a comb, and hence these organisms are called as comb jellies. With this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about the different characteristics of invertebrates and focused on the group of the basal phyla. These include organisms that are diploblasts, and we looked at the phyla Porifera, Cnidaria, and Ctenophora. It should be noted that the phylum Plecozoa also comes under the basal phyla.